Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Erin Tesch. I'm Managing Director of TSG, and I'd like to start off by saying thank you for joining. The purpose of today's webinar is really to provide participants with an opportunity to hear from both TSG and NSF International experts on the complexities associated with products used to treat drinking water. There's often confusion associated with certification requirements versus regulatory requirements. Companies sometimes miss the fact that both certification and local, state, and federal approvals are required in order to use, distribute, and offer for sale products, both devices and chemicals, used to treat drinking water. During today's webinar, we're going to present a few background slides, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. We did receive a number of questions from participants in advance of the webinar, and we really appreciate you sending those in. We do encourage you to ask your questions via the chat function. I will be monitoring, in addition to moderating, presenting, I will be monitoring the questions, so I'm going to do my best in testing my multitasking skills, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So I'm going to provide an overview with my colleague Amanda, and then NSF, my colleagues from NSF will present. So before we get started, I want the panelists to introduce themselves. So again, I'm Erin Tesch. I'm Managing Director of TSG Consulting, and I'm located in Washington, D.C. Amanda?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Phelka. I'm a principal consultant with TSG and a toxicologist by training, and I'm working from my home in Michigan currently.
Great. Blake?
Good morning. This is Blake Stark, General Manager of Water Treatment Chemicals Certification at NSF International, and I am broadcasting from the NSF building in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Thanks, Blake. And Stefan?
Yes, good morning. My name is Stefan Buck. I am the General Manager of NSF's Filtration Products Division.
Terrific. Thank you. So for those of you that aren't familiar with TSG Consulting, we've been providing companies around the world with regulatory and scientific expertise for over 30 years. We help clients navigate the complex regulatory landscape, providing expertise to the highly regulated industrial, agricultural, consumer, food and beverage, and related industries. We partner with clients to help them bring their products to market in Europe and North America and assist them in meeting their compliance goals. We have over 9 offices across Europe and North America. Our team speaks over 30 different languages. In Europe, we have offices in France, Germany, Spain, and the UK. In North America, we have offices in Sacramento, California, Washington, D.C., and Ontario, Canada. We are owned by a company called Science Group, which is a publicly traded company on the London Stock Exchange. Science Group has over 400 employees. We have 12 offices around the globe. We have 2 dedicated R&D facilities, and 25% of our staff have PhDs. So with that, I'd like to hand over the first few slides to Amanda.
Thanks, Erin, and hello, everyone, again. I just wanted to reemphasize the point that Erin made a few moments ago about the fact that the regulation of drinking water products with disinfection claims is quite complex because the products are regulated not only at the federal level, but are also subject to state and local laws. So like any other product making disinfection claims, the chemical products and equipment that are used to disinfect drinking water are regulated under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, or in short form, FIFRA. FIFRA is administered by the U.S. EPA Office of Pesticide Programs and is a federal statute that governs the composition, testing, registration, labeling, promotion, distribution, sale, and use of both pesticides and pesticidal devices. Importantly, it can be really expensive if a pesticide or pesticidal device is identified as being out of compliance with FIFRA, so keep that in mind. We wanted to provide a few definitions to you all today because the definitions around FIFRA have been a source of confusion in the past. Simply put, a pesticide is an organism that is deleterious to man or the environment. Some common examples would be an insect or a rodent or a weed or a microorganism like a virus. And in turn, a pesticide then is any substance or mixture of substances that are intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating those pests. A pesticidal device, like a pesticide, is also used to trap, destroy, repel, or mitigate a pest, but they do so in such a way that it's a physical or mechanical removal of the pest. If you have any further questions about these definitions or otherwise, as you can see on the slide, the definitions and the clarification around those definitions is provided in the 40 CFR. The antimicrobial pesticides is a type of pesticides or a class of pesticides, and these pesticides have two primary uses. The first of which is to disinfect, sanitize, reduce, or mitigate the growth or development of microbiological organisms like bacteria or viruses. And the second is really intended to protect inanimate objects, for example, floors or walls or countertops, from substances that can contaminate, foul, or deteriorate the materials. With respect to drinking water, some of the examples that you all are probably familiar with would be chlorine-based or chloramine disinfectants, ozone, or filters that are treated with bacteriostatic agents.
So the intent clause of FIFRA is often misunderstood. So essentially, under FIFRA, a product is required to be registered if the seller has knowledge that the product is being used or can be used as a pesticide, even if they're not making any claims. And I think that's where a lot of companies can get tripped up. Enforcement generally comes into play when a competitor will turn a company in because they've spent a lot of time and money getting their product approved, and their competitor is selling the same product, not making any claims, but their competitor but the users know that the product can be used as a pesticide. A classic example of this is bleach, for example. So if you sell bleach to a hospital, it's likely going to be used to disinfect surfaces. But that same bleach that's sold in the grocery store could be used for non-pesticidal purposes for laundry whitening, and therefore does not require registration. So moving on to the next slide, there's several exemptions that are relevant to the water industry. Generally, if the product is not used for pesticidal effect, for example, chemicals that are used to improve the taste or odor of water, would not require registration. Products that are intended to exclude pests only by providing a physical barrier against pest access, such as filtration media, would not require registration. So to avoid FIFRA registration, the product must not be intended for use to prevent, destroy, repel, or mitigate a pest, must not make a pesticidal claim or have knowledge that the product will be used as a pesticide, and must be intended to exclude pests only by providing a physical barrier. So another relevant exemption under FIFRA for the water industry is the treated article exemption. So components of water filtration systems often are treated with antimicrobials to protect the component itself from fouling and versus protecting the user. So FIFRA does allow treated articles to be exempt from registration as long as they meet certain criteria, primarily that the pest used to treat the article is registered by EPA for that use, for example, for treating filters or the components of the water, the plastic components, because it will it is used to maintain the integrity of the product, not to protect the user of the product. So there are relevant registration requirements, not only federally, but also at the state level, and that is often overlooked by companies that make products used to treat drinking water. So antimicrobial pesticides, the chemical pesticides, must be registered in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. Devices, however, are only required in 8 states and Puerto Rico. All of the registrations in these states have to be renewed each year, and all the states have different renewals cycles. So I'm going to turn this over now to my colleagues at NSF. So Blake?
Good morning. Thank you very much, Erin and Amanda. This time we'd like to talk about the certification of drinking water chemicals and devices and go over the NSF standards for these products. And before we begin, just a little bit about NSF. We were founded in the mid-1940s, and we have 180 different standards and protocols that we help to develop, which address public health criteria, evaluation criteria for products. We have collaborations with several key trade associations, many representing the users of the product. For example, in the water industry, we work closely with the American Water Works Association. We also collaborate with several governmental agencies that are involved in public health and environmental regulation. We are World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Food Safety, Water Quality, and Indoor Air Environment. And we have certifications of companies and products in place in 180 countries. Most of the NSF certification programs for water products have a 7-step process. And this involves a voluntary application. And then in most cases, there is a submission of information about the product. So for example, with chemicals, we would ask the manufacturer to supply in confidence the ingredients that are used in list of ingredients, how much of each ingredient, really how the product is made. For an assembled type of product, what are those components which contact drinking water? This information is reviewed by our technical staff in the 3rd step, and they are looking for what areas should we test, what are the potential areas of concern in the product, and set up the testing protocol for the product. There is an on-site audit or during COVID pandemic, a virtual audit where we review this information and we verify really that everything that sees drinking water either through treatment or contact with the water, that is the same as the product is manufactured, as what our scientists are reviewing when they're doing the formulation technical review of the product. We take samples, we test the product in our laboratories. There is also a final technical evaluation, often referred to as a normalization, where those test results are used to determine the at-the-tap concentrations of the specific contaminants of interest. So for example, with a chemical, we'll take those test results, and at the maximum expected dose of the chemical, we can determine how much of the respective contaminant would be present in the finished drinking water. After these steps successfully occur, then we can certify the product, and the company and product appears on the NSF website listings. We have several standards and programs for the water industry. And I should mention that these standards are really developed through a consensus process. So it's not so much the staff of NSF that write and maintain the standards, but these different user groups. We have the water suppliers, the water supply regulators, public health regulators, and also the manufacturers of the products that come together in this consensus process to develop and maintain the standards. And in just about every state in the U.S., there are references to these standards. And I'll break these down into really 4 different realms. You have the products that are used in treatment of or contact with public drinking water. And so, for example, Standard 60 covers your drinking water treatment chemicals, products that contact drinking water throughout the distribution system fall under Standard 61. We also have several products that we certify that are plastic pipe and plumbing products that are under NSF Standard 14 and other plumbing product standards. And these are specified in regulations in the plumbing codes. We also operate a large certification program for recreational water products, such as pumps, drains, skimmers used in pool and spa applications, and even pool chemicals are certified under this group of standards. Primarily NSF Standard 50 for the pool products, and then there are other referenced standards, including ASME and ASTM standards for pool products. And then the last group is your filtration products, your drinking water treatment units, such as home treatment devices. And I'll leave, there will be a specific presentation in the coming slides from Stefan Buck on those products. And just a little bit about Standard 60 for drinking water treatment chemicals. It was first developed in the 1980s and became published first time in 1988. It is specified in regulation, legislation, regulation, or policy, and most of the majority of U.S. states and the majority of provinces in Canada. Covers a wide variety of water treatment chemicals, including well drilling products, disinfection and oxidation chemicals, corrosion scale control chemicals, many different categories of water treatment chemicals. And it evaluates safe use levels and potential impurities, to make sure that impurities added to drinking water through the chemicals are within acceptable limits. And we have more than 1,100 clients in this program. And so really the scope of Standard 60 is to establish minimum health effects requirement for the chemicals, the contaminants coming from the chemicals, and impurities that are directly added to drinking water from treatment chemicals. And the majority, right now about 49 states have requirements for chemicals to comply with Standard 60. In 40 states specifically, there's actually a specific regulation that requires that the chemical is certified by a certification body which is accredited by Ansi. So the chemical would need to be evaluated, certified to Standard 60 by an Ansi accredited certification body in most states. And then just to kind of bring this back to how this standard relates to the US EPA FIFRA regulations, you'll see a Venn diagram on the screen, and shows 3 different groups. So if we look at the first field in blue, chemicals that require Standard 60 certification but not EPA FIFRA registration. So some examples of those would be and you can look over in the right-hand column. There's a group of chemicals. So most of the coagulant chemicals and most of the corrosion and scale control chemicals that don't have a disinfection or CITL claim associated with them would fall into that group. Standard 60 certification is required, but not FIFRA registration. There are some chemicals, so looking at that middle overlapping semicircle, where both Standard 60 certification and FIFRA registration is required. And you can see those in the middle group of chemicals in the right-hand column. So chlorine, hypochlorite bleach, calcium hypochlorite, a lot of anything that's used in disinfecting drinking water would need both standard 60 certification and Fifa registration. Also, other cytochemicals such as algicides that are used, copper sulfate being one example, where the chemical is used for algae control in the reservoir in the vicinity of the water intake. Generally needs FIFA registration and also needs standard 60 certification as well. There are molluscicide chemicals covered under the standard as well, which are used for mollusk control around the intake, require standard 60 certification and FIFA registration. And then the last group in the green column on the right would be chemicals that require FIFA registration but do not require standard 60 certification. So that one example would be all of your agricultural chemicals, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides that have CITL claims but are not used in drinking water treatment. FIFA registration is required, but not standard 60 certification for those chemicals. And at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Stefan Buck from our water filtration program to talk about the filtration equipment certification programs.
Great, thank you so much, Blake. And good morning, good afternoon to many of you. Yeah, so the filtration division at NSF has been around since the late 1970s, early 1980s, when the first standard was published to evaluate water treatment devices for drinking water, which would be standard 42. Since then, we've had a number of standards developed and various protocols as well in order to cover various technologies of water treatment across the consumer realm. The standards themselves address three main aspects of product certification. One of them would be material safety, therefore addressing the leachability of materials that are wetted in the products that may go into the drinking water for the consumer. A second aspect would be the structural integrity of these products. Many of these water filtration devices are connected to the household distribution system and therefore are under pressure. And so if they come under pressure, we would evaluate them against those pressures to ensure their integrity. And then the third, and potentially one of the more obvious ones, would be contaminant reduction testing. Each one of the standards that we have addresses a various type of treatment device technology, which then come with its own set of contaminant reduction claims, such as chlorine reduction or lead reduction. And therefore, in order to certify a product and make those claims, those would have to be tested in the laboratory to ensure that they meet the requirements of the standard for that. And within the majority of the drinking water treatment unit standards, you have the ability as a manufacturer to both certify a complete system, which would require all three of those bullet points you see on the screen, or if you're just certifying a component, for example, just a housing or a carbon block, you would just be required to evaluate against the bullet points that would impact that particular product. All of our listings that you can find are on our website, so you can see them for the drinking water treatment chemicals at that link, and then for filtration devices, you will also be able to find them there. Every single one of our clients has met the criteria and therefore followed the 7-step process that Blake had mentioned earlier, but those would be the links in order to verify compliance.
Terrific, thank you. I appreciate that, all our panelists for presenting. So before we kick off with the questions, and we've had a number of questions that have been coming in over the last few, last 10, 15 minutes, I wanted to make you all aware of a paper that TSG has prepared hot off the press, was released today. This will be going out to all of the participants along with the copy of the slides, as well as NSF has a number of documents that will also be sent out to all the participants. This should be coming within the next few days. So with that, I think we are going to move over now to questions. And as I said, I'm going to do my best in trying to monitor, and hopefully for the panelists, let's just chime in, and whoever wants to take that question, or I might direct it to someone, or we might do rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to answer the question. All right, so the first question is about the requirements for pesticide products. So the question is, what are the types of data required to obtain a pesticide registration? So I'm gonna kick that over to Amanda.
Sure, thanks, Erin. There are a number of data requirements that are required for registrants to submit. First and foremost, it's important to note that there's a number of different ways that that information can be supplied. A registrant can, or an applicant can, submit their own data. So in other words, if you've conducted your own toxicology studies or efficacy studies, that is wonderful. You can also cite information that's in the public literature. So if there's a published study speaking to one of the data requirements, that will suffice. And there's also an opportunity to cite data that has been previously submitted to the EPA from another registrant, colloquially known as cite all. The types of data, as I kind of alluded to already, you need to be prepared to submit product chemistry, so everything that is known about your product from a physical and chemical characteristic standpoint. Then from a toxicology standpoint, you need to speak to the mammalian toxicology, typically both acute and long-term studies for an active ingredient, and then the acute endpoints for an end product. Ecotoxicology, so of course EPA is interested not only in public health but also environmental health, and then perhaps equally importantly is the efficacy data requirement. It's also important to know that each of these data requirements come with some very specific guidelines concerning how they need to be conducted, and the EPA is also mindful that the data are submitted or are conducted and the studies are conducted in such a way that they're GLP compliant. So we recommend that you work closely with a laboratory that's not only familiar with the EPA guidelines but also is able to conduct GLP studies.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. That was a very thorough response. All right, here's another one. How long will it take to get my product certified? So I'm assuming there's going to be two different answers from Blake and Stefan, depending on whether it's a chemical versus a device, right? So
Sure,
I don't know.
exactly.
Who wants to start?
I can field that one, or the chemicals part of the question. Erin, thank you. So the average time for certifying a brand new facility for a chemical under standard 60 is in the 8 to 12 week range, or 2 to 3 month range. So for chemicals that are included in the existing reference index pages of standard 60, that would be the average turnaround time. So usually within 3 months. I would like to add one caveat that for a brand new type of chemical, for example, a new type of polymer that hasn't been reviewed before and may need toxicology risk assessment in order to evaluate the permissible levels of the chemical in water, that time may be longer. But for the large group of chemicals that are already where that criteria is already addressed in the standard, then this can usually be done within 3 months. And
yeah, thanks, Blake. And I think for filtration products, it really depends. You know, we have 9 standards that you can certify a product to depending on the technology, from just a simple carbon block to an ultraviolet system. On the short end, for a simpler project that may be just a component certification, you could be looking around 2 to 3 months for something like that, just because you have a lot less testing required. But if you're looking to certify a water treatment devices with maybe 20, 30 contaminant reduction tests associated with it, and depending on what type of volumetric capacity you're looking at, you could be looking at something along the range of 4 to 6 months potentially. It really all comes down to what the scope of that work is and what type of technology we're looking at.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So another question has to do with filtration products that mechanically remove cyst bacteria without chemical toxicants. Would that be exempt from pesticide registration? I'll take that question. Essentially, EPA considers cysts and bacteria to be pests, and therefore they would be subject to the pesticidal device requirements. So EPA would consider them to be devices, and the product would need to be registered in the 8 states, but could be sold, the device could be sold in all the other states without state approval. Okay, let's see, more questions. Of the 3-month overall time frame for Ansi 60 certification, how long does the testing phase take? Same question for Ansi 61. How long does just the testing component take?
Hi, I'll field that question. Thank you, Erin, for chemicals. About of the 2 to 3 months, you're usually looking at about 4 to 6 weeks for the testing, just for receipt of the sample, preparation of the sample, as well as the analytical test. So about half of that time would be dedicated to the testing, and then we try and schedule the audit, or at this time it's a virtual audit, to occur concurrent with that process. So while the sample is being prepared, received, logged in, placed on test, we'll also have our auditor contacting your facility to schedule the audit, so that the two processes can really happen concurrently.
Yeah, and I guess to answer the part on standard 61, it'd be very similar. Geosafety testing, then depending on the product, the test method is slightly different, but we kind of look around the same time frame for that type of testing.
Okay, great. So I have a question. There's a question coming in about Legionella control. What are the pesticide registration requirements related to pesticide products and devices for the control of Legionella? Amanda, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll kick it off, and if you've got anything to add, please feel free to jump in. Manufacturers of pesticidal treatment technologies used to control Legionella is like any other microbial contaminant, and there's the need to comply with the Fifa requirements. I think you mentioned earlier, Erin, about the fact that you have to be very sensitive to use sites and use patterns, and so with Legionella it's no different. So for example, if a product is registered as a disinfectant to control Legionella in control towers, it can't be sold and distributed for uses that it's not registered for. So for example, it can't be used to control Legionella in public water systems without seeking separate FIFRA evaluation. It is important to note that the EPA is in the process of developing an efficacy testing protocol for Legionella claims, and that it's not finalized yet.
Okay, terrific. And I wanted to add to that, it's been TSG's experience that some of these ionization, silver copper ionization systems that have Legionella claims, even though the products are registered as a pesticide federally and registered in the states, some states, even though their own state authority has registered them for and approved that product, some local governments and local public water systems are not allowing those. So there is this sort of disconnect even within a state. Okay, more questions here. So how long does it take to get state registration? I'll take that one. It really depends on whether it's a pesticide product or a device. So for a pesticide product, you can get about 5% of the states approved within the first week after you submit the application. another 15% in maybe 4 weeks, 50 to 60% in 2 months, and then 95% of them would be, you'd get them approved within 4 to 6 months. There are a few states right now that are taking as long as 8 months. In terms of devices, it can be as long as 10 months. Hawaii is the state with the most notable delay right now. So you know, you do need to plan accordingly that it will take some time to get state approvals, and you cannot sell the products into the states without those approvals. Okay, let's see. Moving on. I make a reverse osmosis membrane and do not make any bacteriostatic or bactericidal claims. My product provides a physical barrier from pathogens as a result of its placement in water treatment devices. Is this product considered by EPA to be a pesticide or device? I don't know. Amanda, do you want to take that?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, I believe this is a no because it would be considered a barrier product and is therefore exempt.
Yeah, I agree with you. This would be a barrier product. Okay, let's see. Another question. How long does my certification last? Will my product ever have to be reevaluated after it's certified?
Hi, this is Blake. I can begin. I can answer for chemicals, and perhaps Stefan may chime in for the equipment. But for chemicals, the certification remains active as long as, so basically once we have the certification in place, each site is audited, each manufacturing site is audited on an annual basis, or virtually audited, remotely audited once per calendar year, and each manufactured chemical is tested once per calendar year to the requirements of the standard. So you have your annual audit and your annual testing. And then at the end of the audit, there's a summary of any findings, if there are any. At the end of the testing, there is test results are shared, which will indicate pass, or if there is a contaminant that exceeds its maximum permissible level, that would be outlined on the report, and resolution options made available. As long as those activities are happening successfully, the certification is ongoing. So you have annual audits and annual testing for chemicals. So the reevaluation is really on an annual basis.
Yeah, and for water treatment devices, there's no requirement within the standards themselves. The reevaluation period is really up to the certifier at that point. For NSF International, the reevaluation period for those is every 5 years. We do still require the annual audit, though, to ensure that the manufacturing is being done in accordance with the certification. But reevaluation with respect to testing of the product would happen every 5 years.
Okay, terrific. So here's a question that's come in about biological treatment so biofilms that are used to treat water. Is it classified as a pesticide product or device? So I'll take this question. Yes, it is. Even biological treatment, biological chemicals, biopesticides, and microbial pesticides do require registration with EPA. The process is a little bit easier. It's not easy, but it's a little bit easier. The data requirements are less, and the review time is shorter, and the cost is less to EPA. The fees are less, but yeah, it does require registration. Let's see. How can I think this one's for you, Blake, because it's a chemical related. How can I view the standard 60 regulations that apply in states which my chemical is distributed?
Oh, sure. Very good question. There is a survey that NSF publishes, and we publish it in conjunction with ASDWA, which is the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, and it shows a list of every state, and in that list you can click on any state and you can see either the legislation, regulation, or policy that requires for standard 60 compliance of drinking water supply chemicals, and you can actually view that on a state-by-state basis. This survey also includes Canada provinces as well. So the provincial ministries of environment, those regulations are summarized in the survey as well. The survey is posted on the NSF website at nsf.org. However, we will also distribute a copy of the survey with the collateral material as a follow-up to this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, this is an interesting question. What's the penalty for selling product that requires registration but doesn't have the registration? Amanda, do you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
I don't know much, but I believe it's about $20,000 per shipment.
You are correct. It is $20,258 to be exact, per shipment, which can get pretty significant. This is a highly regulated area. So, okay, moving on. Let's see. How long does the pesticide registration process take? I'll answer that. It's essentially, it can take 6 months, it could take over 2 years. It depends on the formulation of the product, both the active ingredient and the inerts. It depends on the specific claims that you're making. It can vary significantly. But again, once you get your product approved federally, you do need to get it approved in the states where you offer it for sale. Okay. Here's another one. Here's a question for my friends at NSF. What happens if I make a change to my certified product or reformulate?
Hi, this is Blake. I can take that one. There is a project that we can open. We refer to it as a revision project, but each certified product, there's a registered document that we provide the client on a secure portal, which is the official record of product composition that we have on record at NSF, and this is viewed during these annual audits. There's a process by which the manufacturer can request. You may even start with an email to your NSF contact to update that registered document to whether it's a new ingredient or new supplier of an ingredient, and then our technical staff reviews that proposed change. Once the review is conducted successfully, then we issue a revised document to the manufacturer encompassing of that change.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. It's important to make sure as a manufacturer that you do that before you start using or making that change in your product, because if you do, let's say, change a material or change a supplier of your NSF certified product, that change has not been evaluated yet and has not been certified. So that product technically is not certified until it's approved. So it's important to make those requests before you actually put them in the manufacturing process.
Great. And this was not a question that was asked, but I'm going to chime in here. The same holds for pesticide registration and pesticide devices. You cannot make a change to the product or the formulation without and sell it without prior approval from EPA. So there is a strategy for chemical products in particular. There is a strategy associated with when you go in the first time to submit an application, submit data that gives you some flexibility. And TSG can provide more details if anyone's interested on that, but it's really, really important that you cannot sell this product without approval from EPA or the states. Okay, another question has to do with the pulp and paper industry. I think this is probably for you, Blake. Are chemicals used in the pulp and paper industry required to have 60 certification?
Oh, yes, good question. Thank you. In general, the only time that standard 60 certification is universally required is if the chemical is used in a drinking water treatment application. So if in the paper mill operation, if that chemical is in any way treating, whether it's treating the drinking water within the plant, there would be a certification, standard 60 certification required. They're generally, if it's not used to treat drinking water supply, but it's used in the paper mill process, there probably would not be a governmental standard 60 certification required. However, and I'll just kind of add this caveat that we do occasionally see bid requests, sometimes for pulp and paper, sometimes for wastewater treatment, other applications where there will be a standard 60 specification or preferred specification just to kind of establish general safety of the chemical. But the standard was really designed for drinking water treatment, not for pulp and paper, wastewater, or other types of processes. But occasionally we'll see it on a bid specification as a requirement, just to establish general safety of the product. Thank you.
Okay, great. So here's a question about Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. So I think I'm confused about the difference between Safe Drinking Water Act and FIFRA. So if I'm in compliance with Safe Drinking Water Act, does it mean I'm also in compliance with FIFRA? Amanda, you want to take that?
Sure. Unfortunately, no. The pesticide requirements under FIFRA are in fact independent from the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. The Safe Drinking Water Act generally imposes requirements on the public water systems, so your municipal water supply or your private water supply, and not on product manufacturers. So there's not a process by which the disinfectant product is approved or registered under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Whereas with FIFRA, the registration applies to products and product manufacturers. So the registration compliance under FIFRA doesn't mean that it meets the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And it also, registration with FIFRA also doesn't mean that the product meets the state or local laws that we spoke of during the presentation in place for drinking water products used by public water systems. So this would include, of course, the NSF Ansi drinking water standards.
Okay, terrific. So here's another question that just came in. Besides the U.S. and Canada, has there been any traction on acceptance of NSF 60 in other countries such as Brazil?
Hi, this is Blake. I can take that one. Yes, we do see quite a few requests for standard 60 certification in other areas of the world. One common example is in the Middle East. For a lot of the large-scale desalination systems that are in place or built in the Middle East, we will see many standard 60 certification requests for those. There's a lot of reverse osmosis antiscalant chemicals, distillation antiscalant chemicals, membrane cleaners that are used in those processes. So we see quite a few bid requests there that require standard 60. Another example is South Africa, where many of the large water supplies are operated by Rand Water Company, and Rand Water has specifications for standard 60 certification. So there are pockets, a few places in the world, several places in the world where we do see, outside of North America, where we do see requests for standard 60 certification. Brazil has a little bit different type of structure for the chemicals specification. Brazil has a standard it's a Brazil national standard, ABNT NBR 15784, which is in many ways very similar to Standard 60. It was in many ways patterned after Standard 60, includes many of the same evaluation methods. Some of the pass-fail limits for contaminants are different. And then, so for the large water systems in Brazil, they're basically looking for is a test report that is less than 2 years old from an accredited laboratory showing compliance of the treatment chemical to that Brazil national standard. So it just needs to be a report by an accredited, in Metro accredited laboratory that provides that testing. So the NSF Brazil lab is one of the laboratories that does that testing.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So this question, I have a filtration product that makes a bacteriostat agent with, I make a filtration product with a bacteriostat agent that's intended to prevent the filtration media from fouling and protect the product's durability. I don't make an antimicrobial claim. Does this require Fifa registration? And I'll answer that one. No, it doesn't. Good news. That would be considered a treated article because you are not, as long as the bacteriostat agent that's used in it is approved by EPA for that use, and you're not making any antimicrobial claims or pesticidal claims because you're just saying that it's protecting the integrity of the product, then it would qualify and meet the criteria of the treated article exemption. Okay, here's another question, I think, for NSF. So there are many standard developing organizations out there. Why does my product need to be certified to NSF Ansi standard?
Okay, I can take that one, Mrs. Blake. In these state regulations or the Canada regulations, it does specify in the vast majority of cases that the certifier of the chemical needs to be accredited by Ansi. So in the U.S., that certifier needs to be NSF or one of the certifiers, a small group of certifiers that is accredited by Ansi, American National Standards Institute, to conduct the certification. In Canada, a fairly similar process where the chemical needs to be certified by a certification organization that is accredited by SCC, the Standards Council of Canada, NSF being one of the certifiers that is accredited to do Standard 60 certification in Canada. In fact, the name of the title of Standard 60 was about a year or so updated to NSF Ansi CAN Standard 60 because it's a Canada accredited standard in addition to Ansi accredited standard. So basically, by virtue of those regulations, it is saying that it needs to be by one of the accredited certifiers in the U.S. or Canada.
Yeah, and I can expand on that for filtration products. Contrary to that, the certification for filtration products is actually voluntary. There are a few exemptions. There's just 2 states, at least in the United States, that do require it. For example, California. If you're making a health claim and you want to sell your product in California, it has to be registered with the state. That inherently requires a third-party certification of the product. Iowa also requires a registration. And you will also find the NSF Ansi Drinking Water Treatment Unit standards in the plumbing codes. That being said, though, they are basically essentially a voluntary standard by the manufacturer in order to show compliance and to show to distinguish their product's performance and safety.
Terrific, thank you. Well, I think we're out of time, so I want to thank our panelists. We appreciate the participants for listening. You will have our contact information on the slides that we send out in the next few days, and please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have additional questions. Thanks again and have a great day.